Garrett Sinclair stood at the glass doors of Marchetti Development Corp. With sawdust still on his boots and a manila envelope in his hand. The security guard looked him over, took in the canvas jacket and the calluses, and almost waved him off. Then Garrett slid an old business card across the counter. Victor Marchetti's name on the front. On the back, in faded ink, 4 words in a dead man's hand. Henry, I owe you. The guard picked up the phone. A pause, then a woman's voice through the intercom, low and even. Send him up. The elevator opened. Floor 40. If stories about quiet men who keep their word land somewhere with you, stay a while. There's more to this one than the door he walked through. The elevator chimed and Garrett stepped out into a corridor of pale stone and brushed steel. The hallway smelled of polished metal and cold coffee, and the carpet under his boots was the kind that swallowed footsteps and money in equal measure. A receptionist in a charcoal blazer led him past 3 closed doors without speaking. The doors to the corner office were already open. Elise Marchetti sat behind a long walnut desk, hair pulled back, and a tablet in front of her and a pen turning slowly between her fingers. She did not stand. She did not need to. The light from the harbor came in over her left shoulder and made the room read like a courtroom. Mr. Sinclair. Her voice carried the flat ease of someone who ran rooms for a living. Please. Garrett took the chair across from her and set the envelope on the desk. He didn't open it. He let her do that. He kept his hands folded over one knee and waited the way men wait at funerals. She slid out the contents with 2 fingers. A handwritten promissory note. $400,000. 12 years old. Her father's signature in black ink at the bottom, and beside it the name of a witness who had been dead 3 years now. A notarized copy of the witness affidavit was clipped behind it. She read it twice. The pen had stopped turning. My father signed this, she said. Not a question. I'm not going to insult you by pretending otherwise. Good, Garrett said, but I can't write you a check today. The company is in restructuring. Personal debts that never made it to the books require board approval, and the board won't approve a $40,000 lunch this quarter, let alone $400,000. That's your problem, Garrett said. There was no heat in it. He sounded like a man stating the weather. Debt is debt. Elise looked at him for a long moment. Most people, by the 3rd sentence, were either angry or apologizing. Garrett was neither. He sat with his hands folded, patient as a tree, and looked at her the way he might look at a beam he was deciding whether to keep or replace. 48 hours, she said. I'll verify everything on my end and call you. My number is on the back of the note. He rose. At the door he stopped because she spoke again. Mr. Sinclair, what do you do? Carpenter, he said. The door closed behind him. Elise watched the elevator light count down from 40. The pen had started turning again, but slower now, like she was thinking around it. When the number hit 1 and held, she set the pen down beside the note and pressed both palms flat against the cool wood of the desk. In the lobby, the security guard returned the old business card without a word. Garrett tucked it into his shirt pocket, walked out into the cold Connecticut afternoon, and crossed the street to where his pickup waited under a leafless oak. He sat for a minute with the keys in his lap before turning the engine over. He had promised his father he would do this. He had not promised himself he would enjoy it. He drove back up the coast with the heater turned low and the radio off. The promissory note had lived in a cigar box in his father's closet for 12 years. Henry Sinclair had been a careful man who had once told his son that the only debts worth chasing were the ones owed by men who could afford to pay. Garrett had not understood that as a boy. He understood it now. His father had not pursued the note in his lifetime because his pride would not let him knock on Victor Marchetti's door asking for money. He had left it to his son the way other men leave a watch or a deed, and he had said only one thing about it, 6 months before he died, sitting at the kitchen table with the box between them. Do this when I'm gone. Don't make me watch. 40 floors up, Elise Marchetti pulled the promissory note closer and read her father's signature one more time. Outside the window, Stamford glittered like a thing she suddenly didn't trust. She picked up the phone, hesitated, and set it back down. She turned the note over in her hands and looked at her father's writing on the back of the card. Henry, I owe you. The handwriting was loose. Late night, the kind her father used at the end of long days, when the bourbon had taken the edge off his control. She had not seen that version of his handwriting in years. She had not, she realized, looked through any of his personal papers since the funeral. 2 days later, the call came at 9 in the morning. Elise asked Garrett to come back to the office. He came in the same jacket and the same boots. This time she stood when he entered and gestured to a smaller table by the window. 2 chairs, no desk between them, a pot of coffee on a tray. She poured for both of them without asking how he took it, then slid the cream and sugar across. "I'm not going to pay you $400,000 today," she said. "I'm going to offer you something else." Garrett waited. He left the cream alone. "My father's old estate, up the coast in Ridgeway, is being converted into a small hotel. 12 rooms. The renovation has been stalled for 6 months. The current foreman is competent on paper and useless in practice. I need someone with real skill and no political baggage inside this company to run the build. 90 days. Lead consultant. $400,000, paid on completion. That settles the note." "Why me?" "Because you walked in here with a piece of paper and didn't raise your voice once. That tells me what kind of man you are. And because I looked at the work that came out of your shop last year, and I know the difference between a carpenter and a craftsman." Garrett did not answer immediately. He turned his coffee cup half a turn, studying the rim. "You don't want to pay me cash because the board will see it. I don't want to pay you cash because the board will ask why, and I don't have a good answer yet." He looked up at that. "You'd be taking a contract for work you could lawfully demand in court," she said. "But court takes 2 years and $100,000 in fees. This takes 90 days. Garrett considered her. There was something underneath the offer she wasn't saying. He could feel it the way you feel a draft in a closed room. "The cost overruns on a 6-month stalled boutique renovation," he said. "Should be running you about $90,000 a month minimum. If your foreman is useless and your materials line is what I think it is, your real exposure is closer to $1.5 million by year end. Paying me $400 to take it over is the cheapest insurance you'll ever buy. That isn't the reason you're offering." For 3 seconds, Elise didn't move. Then she set down her cup. "What did you say you do, Mr. Sinclair?" "I said I'm a carpenter." "That's not all you've been." He didn't deny it. He didn't elaborate. He looked out the window at the harbor, where a tugboat was working a barge into the channel. "I used to do something else. Now I build cabinets." She didn't push. But the calculation behind her eyes shifted from one of management to one of recognition. He could see her decide, in real time, that she wanted this man inside her building for reasons that had nothing to do with cabinets. 90 days, Garrett said. "Not one more. And I want the terms in writing by tomorrow morning. You'll have them by 8. He left the cup half full and walked out. That night, back at the small house on the edge of Ridgeway, Garrett sat across from his daughter at the kitchen table while she did her math homework. Nola was 11, all elbows and quiet attention, a braid coming loose at the back of her neck. The kitchen smelled like the pot roast he had put in the slow cooker that morning before he drove down. "You're thinking?" she said without looking up. "A little. About Grandpa?" He nodded. She finished a problem before she spoke again. "What would he want you to do?" "Finish it." "Then finish it." She turned the page. "It's just math, Dad." He smiled in spite of himself and went out to the workshop behind the house to call Elise. He told her he would take the contract. When he hung up, she sat alone in her office, opened a browser, and typed his name into the search bar with 3 other words attached. Goldman Sachs, New York. The results loaded slowly. An archived industry profile. A panel photograph from a conference 12 years back. A short article about a portfolio manager who had walked away from a partner track seat at 35 and never given a public reason. By the time the page had rendered, her hand was no longer on the mouse. She read it twice. Then she closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, because the man who had just hung up on her had not been guessing about her cost overruns. He had been telling her the truth at the bottom of her own balance sheet. The Marchetti estate sat on a wooded bluff above Long Island Sound, a colonial revival of weathered brick with white columns gone gray, and a slate roof that had been losing pieces for years. Garrett walked the grounds before he walked the house. He read the bones of the place from the outside in. Foundation cracks along the southeast corner, sagging porch line, gutters that had not been cleaned since the last administration. The lawn had not been cut in a month. A stone birdbath was full of black water. By the time Elisa's car came up the gravel drive, he had a notebook half full and a count of 17 things he would have to fix before he could start on what she had hired him for. She wore boots that morning instead of heels, and a wool coat the color of slate. She led him through the front rooms, the dining room, the kitchen that had been gutted and abandoned mid-project. In the dining room she paused at a long oak table that had not been moved in 40 years. "My father sat here every morning," she said. "Same chair, same paper, same cup of coffee that he never finished." Garrett ran a palm across the table's edge. He felt the joinery, the dovetails under the lip, the wear pattern of an elbow on the same square foot of wood for decades. There was a faint ring on the surface where a cup had sat through countless mornings, burned into the finish by sun and time. "Whoever built this," he said, "knew what he was doing." She glanced at him. He did not look back. They moved on. On the second floor, a door at the end of the hall was locked. The foreman, Drew Pelton, met them outside it with a clipboard and a thin smile that was already failing. "Owner's office," Drew said. "Don't have a key. Mr. Marchetti kept that one private." "Then we'll get a locksmith," Elise said. Drew's smile thinned further. "We've been holding off, ma'am. Out of respect, get a locksmith." In the cellar, Garrett noted fresh tool marks on the old fieldstone recent work. Careful, not on any drawing he'd been handed. Someone had pulled a stone out of the wall and put it back. He didn't mention it yet. He filed it. Outside, Elise introduced him to the crew as the new lead. 3 men in work boots looked at the ground. Drew shook Garrett's hand with a grip designed to be remembered. "Heard you do nice cabinets," Drew said. "I do," Garrett said, and let go first. Through the first week, Garrett worked the way he always had. Quiet, early, methodical. He arrived before the crew and left after them. He measured what Drew had logged and found that half of it didn't match the walls. He pulled invoices in the on-site trailer and found lumber billed at 3 times the regional rate, drywall billed twice, and a subline for consulting that had no consultant attached. The invoices traced back to a shell company with a Delaware address and a name that meant nothing to anyone who hadn't grown up reading filings. Garrett had grown up reading filings. He took photographs of every page with his phone and put them on a private drive that no one at Marchetti Corp could touch. He didn't tell Elise. Not yet. He wanted the picture whole. On a Thursday afternoon, Raymond Cole came to the estate. Garrett knew the type before he knew the name. A man in a topcoat that cost more than a small car, white hair cut by someone who flew in, a handshake calibrated for warmth without commitment. Raymond walked the porch with the air of a man surveying property he already owned. "You're the carpenter," Raymond said. "Elise speaks highly. That's kind of her. It's quite a leap. From cabinets to project lead. It's quite a project." Raymond's smile didn't quite reach. "We're all curious to see how it goes." He moved on, pulled Drew aside in the side yard, and spoke to him for 10 minutes in a voice too low to carry. Garrett watched from the second-floor window without seeming to. When the car went back down the drive, Drew's neck was red, and his hands were in his pockets, and Garrett wrote a single line in his notebook and underlined it twice. That evening he drove Nola to the diner on Route 7. She ordered a grilled cheese without looking at the menu. He ordered the same. The booth they always took had a chipped corner she had once said looked like a sleeping dog. "How's the lady boss?" Nola asked. He thought about it. "Complicated. You're complicated too. That's why we get along." She kicked his shin under the table, gently, the way she had since she was small. He kicked back. The waitress refilled his coffee without asking. Outside the window, a school bus passed in the dusk with its lights on already. "Dad." "Yeah." Mom would have liked her. He looked up. Nola was studying the laminated menu the way she studied everything she didn't want to be caught studying. "Why do you say that?" "Because Mom didn't like fake people. The lady boss isn't fake. She just doesn't show what she thinks." Nola took a sip of her milkshake. Mom was the same way at first. He let that sit. He had not told his daughter anything about Elise beyond a name and a job description. She had built the rest, the way she built everything from small observations and long silences in the truck, and a child's instinct for reading the weather around her father. "Eat your sandwich," he said. She smiled around the straw. "Yes, sir." That night Elise called him. It was late, almost 11, and her voice was not the voice from the office. It was thinner. He could hear a television on somewhere behind her, turned low. The wind was up outside his shop, and he had to step away from the bandsaw to hear her. "How was the site today?" He told her about the seller marks. He did not tell her about the invoices. "Anything else?" "Nothing worth a phone call this late." A pause. He could hear her breathing. "Good night, Mr. Sinclair." Garrett. Good night." He held the phone against his ear for a second after she hung up, then set it down on the workshop bench and went back to sanding the chair he was making for his daughter. Outside the high window, a thin moon was climbing over the pines. He worked until midnight without thinking much, the way he always worked when something was bothering him and he couldn't yet name what. The locksmith came on a Tuesday. Drew was conveniently absent a dentist appointment, he said in his text, and Elise and Garrett stood in the upstairs hallway, while a small woman in coveralls did her work in under 3 minutes. The door swung inward on a room that had not been touched since Victor Marchetti's death 4 months earlier. A leather chair pulled out from the desk at an angle, as if someone had stood up to take a call and never come back. Pens in a cup, a coffee ring on the blotter, a small safe in the corner with a brass dial. The air inside the room was different from the rest of the house, drier, older, like the inside of a closed book. Elise walked in slowly. Garrett stayed in the doorway. He understood without being told that this was not his room to enter. "I'll be downstairs," he said. He turned and went, and she stood alone in the middle of her father's office and breathed through her nose until the tightness in her chest let go. She opened the desk drawers, one by one. Tax folders and green hanging files. A leather notebook with names and numbers in her father's slanted handwriting. A second folder marked only with a date from 9 years back. Inside it were transfer records, personal advances to half a dozen names she did not recognize, and 2 she did. One of the names she did was Henry Sinclair. The amounts ran to 7 figures in total. Every transfer was countersigned by Raymond Cole. She closed the folder. She closed the drawer. She walked downstairs and found Garrett on his knees at the foot of the main staircase, checking a banister joint with his hand. "Garrett," she said. He stood up. "I don't think my father only owed your father." He waited. "I think someone doesn't want me to know about any of it." He looked at her for a long moment, and then he nodded once and went back to the banister, because some sentences need the air around them, not more words. But before he knelt back down, he said quietly, without looking up, "Then we go careful." She heard the word "we" and did not correct it. Janet Hargrove came to his workshop on a Saturday morning. She had never been to his house. He did not know how she had found the address until he remembered she had been Victor Marchetti's assistant for 20 years, and women like Janet found anything they wanted to find. She stood in the doorway with her purse held in front of her like a small shield. She was somewhere past 50, gray at the temples, a face that had spent a lifetime keeping other people's secrets and was tired of it. The morning sun came in low behind her and put a square of light on the workshop floor between them. "Mr. Sinclair, may I sit down?" He cleared a chair and put coffee on. "I have to tell you something," Janet said, "and I would prefer to tell you before I tell Elise, because once I tell Elise, Raymond Cole will make sure I never tell anyone anything ever again." Garrett set the cup in front of her. He did not push it across the table. He let her come to it on her own. "Your father did not lend Victor $400,000, she said. "Your father invested over $1 million in a private land project Victor and Raymond ran together, farmland north of Ridgeway. They were buying it up cheap before a rezoning vote, and they were buying the vote with the money. Your father found out and pulled out. The $400,000 promissory note was Victor's idea of partial restitution. The rest of your father's money never came back. It went to Raymond through 3 shell entities and into a private account in Wilmington that I am almost certain still exists." Garrett did not move. The shop ticked around him in the small sounds of a cooling stove and a clock on the wall. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Elise is going to find it on her own. And when she does, Raymond is going to move first. He has things on me from the books. I helped Victor make some of those numbers fit, and Raymond knows. I have been quiet because I had a choice between quiet and prison. I don't think I have that choice much longer." "Does Elise know?" "No, not yet. If you tell her, please tell her, after I am protected. I came to you because you are the only person inside that house who Raymond can't touch." "Why is that?" Janet looked at the workshop walls, at the planes and chisels hung in their oiled rows, at the half-finished chair on the bench. "Because you don't want anything he can take away." She left with the coffee untouched. Garrett stood at the window of his shop and watched her car go down the long gravel drive, and he thought about his father, who had been a careful man, and who had been swindled the only way careful men get swindled, by a friend. He went back to the bench. He picked up a chisel. He set it down. He picked up the phone and made 2 calls. The first was to a lawyer in New York he had not spoken to in 7 years, a woman named Hannah Reyes, who had once worked across a deal table from him and who now ran her own firm out of an office on Madison. He told her, in 5 sentences, what was happening. She said she would clear her Thursday. The second call was to a forensic accountant who owed him a favor older than his daughter. He asked for 2 weeks of his time. The accountant did not ask why. When he hung up, Nola was standing in the workshop door in her socks, watching him. "Dad." "Yeah." "Are we okay?" He thought about how to answer that without lying. "We're okay," he said. "I'm fixing something old. It's going to take a while." She nodded the way she nodded at math problems. "Okay." She went back to the house. For 10 days, Garrett worked the estate by day and worked Victor Marchetti's financial trail by night. He used nothing he wasn't entitled to use: public land records, county recorder filings, corporate registration data, press releases on rezonings. He laid them out on the floor of his workshop like a quilt and walked around them in his socks at midnight, with a mug of cold coffee in one hand. Every personal advance Victor had made matched a parcel of land bought through a shell entity. Every shell entity, 2 layers down, named Raymond Cole as managing member. The pattern was not subtle. It had simply been buried under enough paper that no one without training would dig. By the 8th night he had the spine of it. By the 10th he had the cross-referencing tight enough to put in front of a state attorney without flinching. On the 11th evening he drove to the estate. Elise was there alone, walking the empty dining room with a cup of cold coffee in her hand. She had taken to coming up here in the evenings, he had noticed, when the city office got too full of people. He spread the papers on the long oak table, the table she had told him her father sat at every morning. He did not soften it. "You need to see this," she read in silence. Her face did not change. Her hand, when she turned the 3rd page, was steady. By the 7th page it was not. She set the last document down. She did not speak for a full minute. The wind off the sound moved a loose pane somewhere in the back of the house. "How long have you known?" she said. 11 days. Janet came to me first. "Why didn't you tell me 11 days ago?" "Because if I told you before I had the trail, you'd have walked into Raymond's office without it, and he'd have buried both of us. I needed time to build something he can't lie his way out of." She nodded once, slowly. She put both her hands flat on the oak, on the same patch of wood her father had worn smooth. "Could you give me a minute?" she said. "Yes." He walked out into the hallway and shut the door behind him. He did not go far. He leaned his back against the wall opposite the door and waited. He heard nothing through the wood. He had not expected to. He looked at the floor and counted the boards from one end of the hallway to the other, and started over. After 10 minutes, the door opened and Elise stepped out. Her eyes were red, her shoulders were not. She saw him still standing there. She did not say thank you. She said, "Come back inside." They worked through the rest of that evening at the oak table. Elise made coffee in the half-renovated kitchen and brought 2 cups back. Garrett laid out the documents in the order he would want them argued, the way he had once laid out deal books for partners who did not have time to read everything. He told her which page to pause on and which page to hand to which director. He told her not to raise her voice and not to look at Raymond when she presented the contract, and to wait 3 seconds after each major slide before turning the page. "Why 3 seconds?" she asked. "Because that's how long it takes a man who has just been hit to decide whether to swing back. If he hasn't swung by 3, he isn't going to, and the room will see him not swing." She wrote it down on a yellow pad. Around midnight she sat back in her chair and looked at him across the table. The lamp between them put half her face in light and half in shadow. "You were good at this," she said. "Whatever this was, I was good at it. I wasn't good for it." "What does that mean?" He thought about it longer than she expected. "It means I could do it without bleeding. That isn't a thing you should be proud of being good at." She did not answer. She folded a corner of her pad and unfolded it. After a minute she said, "My father was good at it without bleeding too. I think that's why he is where he is now." "He's nowhere," Garrett said gently. "He's just dead." She looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded once, and they went back to the papers. The board meeting was called for the following Friday at 9. Raymond Cole filed the notice on a Thursday morning. The agenda was simple: a vote of no confidence in the CEO. The grounds were vague enough to be lethal: unauthorized consultant engagement, project delays at the estate, Failure of leadership. Elise read the notice in her office at 1 in the afternoon and called Garrett at 1:03. He's moving. I know. I saw the filing. I need into my father's safe tonight. I have never opened it. The combination is not in any file I have. I'll bring tools. He drove to the estate after dark. The house was empty and cold. The heat had been cut back to save fuel during the build. Elise met him at the door with 2 flashlights and a thermos. They went upstairs to Victor's office, and Garrett knelt in front of the small brass safe and listened to it the way a doctor listens to a chest. He had learned this a long time ago, from a foreman in his second year of summer construction work, before he had ever seen a balance sheet. It took him 40 minutes. Inside were 3 items: a flash drive in a plastic sleeve, a sealed land contract with Raymond Cole's signature on the front page, and a handwritten letter, folded once, addressed in Victor's careful slant to Elise. It had never been mailed. Elise unfolded it under the desk lamp. Garrett stepped back and let her read. Elise, the letter began, if you are reading this, it means I did not find the courage to say it to your face. Raymond Cole was never my friend. I was wrong about him for 30 years, and I knew I was wrong for the last 5. I have done things that you will have to clean up, and I am sorry I am leaving you the broom. The papers in this safe will tell you what I cannot. There is a man named Henry Sinclair who I cheated, and a son of his I never met. If he ever comes for what he is owed, pay him. Be braver than I was. I love you, Dad. She read it twice. She folded it back along its old creases. She put it in her coat pocket. She looked at Garrett standing in the half-shadow at the edge of the lamp. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow. She looked up at him from the chair. Can you help me prepare for the meeting tonight? It's my old line of work. She almost smiled then. It was the first real one. It lasted half a second and it changed the room. The boardroom on Friday at 9 was full. 11 directors, 2 lawyers, a stenographer, and Raymond Cole at the long end of the table in a navy suit with a pocket square the color of dried blood. Elise sat at the head. Garrett was not in the room. He was in the office next door with Janet Hargrove, Hannah Reyes from New York, and the forensic accountant who had not slept much in 2 weeks. Raymond opened. He spoke for 12 minutes in the measured cadence of a man who had won rooms before. He talked about stewardship. He talked about a young CEO finding her feet. He talked about the unfortunate engagement of an outside consultant without process. Heads at the table moved gently up and down. A woman in a gray suit at the middle of the table was already writing on her notepad. When he finished, Elise let the silence sit for a count of 3. Then she stood. She did not raise her voice. She walked the board through it the way Garrett had walked her through it on the oak table. Inflated material invoices traced to a Delaware shell. The shell's managing member, the land parcels, the rezoning dates, the personal advances from Victor's books matched line by line to the parcels. She put up the contract from the safe last. Raymond's signature on the front page filled the projector screen. A man at the middle of the table set down his pen. Raymond said, "Those documents are out of context." Elise said, "Then let's add context." She opened the side door. Janet Hargrove walked in with a notarized statement and Hannah Reyes beside her. Janet did not look at Raymond when she sat. She read her statement in a voice that did not shake. Names, dates, accounts, the Wilmington account. When she was done, she set the statement on the table and folded her hands in her lap. The vote was not the vote Raymond had called. It was a vote to suspend him pending an internal investigation and to refer the file to the state attorney general's office. It passed 9-2. Raymond stood up. He buttoned his jacket the way men button jackets to leave a room with dignity they no longer possess. He walked out past the office where Garrett was waiting with the New York lawyer. He stopped in the doorway. "You're just a carpenter," Raymond said. Garrett did not look up from the contract he was reading. "And you're just a thief in a leather chair." Raymond left. Garrett finished the paragraph he was on before he turned the page. That night, Garrett drove home with the radio off again. He stopped on the shoulder of the Merritt Parkway for 10 minutes a few miles from his exit and sat with his hands on the wheel and his forehead against the back of his thumb. He had not put himself in front of a board in 7 years. He had not wanted to. He had walked away from that life because it had a way of becoming the only life a man had, and he had not wanted his daughter to grow up beside that version of him. Tonight he had walked back into the edge of it for one afternoon, and he had felt every old reflex come back the way a swimmer feels the water remember him. It had not made him proud. It had only made him tired. He pulled back onto the road and drove the rest of the way home. Nola was asleep on the couch with a book open across her chest. He carried her to bed and she did not wake up. In the morning she would ask him how it went, and he would say it went fine, and she would know better and not push. Janet Hargrove was offered immunity in exchange for full testimony. She took it. She kept her house. She did not lose her pension. She sent Garrett a card 3 weeks later that said only, "Thank you for not asking me to be brave alone," and he kept it in the cigar box where his father had kept the note. 3 weeks later, the work at the estate was nearly done. The new crew, hand-picked, finished in days what Drew had stretched into months. The slate roof was patched, the kitchen worked, the porch line ran straight again, and the gutters had been cleaned for the first time in 5 years. In the dining room, Garrett had refused to refinish the long oak table. He had cleaned it, oiled it, and left every scratch and every elbow-shaped hollow exactly where it had been. The faint ring where Victor's cup had sat through countless mornings was still there, just darker, as if oiled into permanence. Elise walked the dining room on a Tuesday afternoon and ran her hand along the wood and understood without being told. She found him in the front hall coiling extension cords. "I have your check," she said. He took it. He looked at the number for the length of a breath and folded it into his jacket pocket. "I'm not keeping it," he said. "I'm starting a scholarship at the Ridgeway High School in my father's name. Trade and engineering. Kids who work after class. That's a lot of scholarships." He was a generous man. The front door opened and Nola came in, backpack on one shoulder, hair pulled back the way her mother used to wear it. She walked straight past both of them into the dining room, climbed into the chair at the head of the oak table, and opened a paperback. She did not say hello. She did not need to. Elise watched her, then looked at Garrett. "She likes the house. She likes the table." They walked into the dining room together and stood for a minute watching Nola read. Elise had not spent time around a child in years, and she did not know what to do with her hands. Garrett saw this without looking at her. "She doesn't need you to do anything," he said quietly. "She just needs you to be in the room." Elise glanced at him. That's what her mother used to say. He did not elaborate. He did not have to. They walked to the tall window that looked east toward the Sound. The light was the long, low light of late afternoon in November. Their shoulders were close enough that he could feel the wool of her coat against his sleeve. 90 days are up," Garrett said. "I know." He waited. "That table is going to need maintenance," she said, periodically. He looked over at her. She was looking at her father's table. The corner of her mouth had moved. Behind them, Nola turned a page. The sunlight fell across the old oak in a long, pale rectangle, the same patch of light that an older man had read his paper in every morning for 40 years. A father had kept his last promise on that table. A daughter had learned what her father had really been on that table. And two people, for the first time, stood beside each other at the window without needing a reason to be there. Outside, the wind came off the Sound and moved through the bare trees. Inside, no one spoke. There was nothing left that needed saying out loud.